Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. Here you can grow your knowledge about marketing operations, listen to ideas and strategies to help you scale, grow, and optimize your efficiency, drive your speed to market, and enrich your work life. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Chris Musk, Marketing Operations Manager at Buffini Company, the largest training and coaching company in North America for real estate professionals. Thanks for joining me today, Chris.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Chris, your first exposure to marketing operations was working with Marketo. Now, you've since been involved in lots of activities in marketing, creating marketing email and marketing email copy, sales enablement, event marketing, marketing automation, B2B support, lead gen, campaign strategy, you name it. So what is it about marketing operations that you just love?
Yeah, I would have to say, I think it's honestly our contribution to the team. I think we are quite literally like the engine that drives so much of the production for a whole marketing team. And I think our direct line of sight to revenue as well, right? Like obviously we own a lot of reporting. Email is typically one of the top performing channels for marketers to generate leads and revenue. And obviously I know a big part of marketing operations, of course, is email. And so I would say really just those two things, having that direct line of sight for revenue, being a part of that. And also, again, just like the essence of that team building and, my own fellow marketing team members, they're basically my clients, right? I'm serving them all day long. And so you get really exposed to almost every different part of the department. And you just really feel like that central pillar that everyone depends on. And so, for me personally, big team player, and I'm always very results focused. So just having that sense of camaraderie and then also being able to say, I had a part in marketing hitting its number and the company growing and all that fun jazz. It honestly does get me really psyched up. And I think a part of the reason why, I've really found a passion for marketing operations.
Well, that's really interesting because I remember when you and I chatted before, you had mentioned to me that although you're driving the marketing operations team, you really feel that you're a marketer first, and that marketing operations is more of the skill set that you've acquired, along the way. So can you share just a little bit more about why that distinction is important to you, or why it should even be important to, any marketer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for myself, as you touched on, I've been in most areas of marketing that you can be in, and spent, although most of my time in marketing ops and marketing automation. But I think why I kind of like to make that distinction is I've learned over the years to approach my work trying to think more like a CEO or a CMO and not be so siloed in thinking as just my world of marketing operations, right? So how does the marketing department serve the entire company? How are we helping generate revenue? How are we helping enable sales? And that's obviously done through so many different ways, right? Whether it's paid search campaigns, whether it's managing your email database, whether it's event management, all the different activities that marketing is doing. But I think, part of what I've learned to adopt is more of that global view, like constantly tying back, what is my team working on? How does that contribute to revenue? How does that help us hit our goals? How are we helping support the company? And I think on that note, I've definitely noticed at times, and I've been guilty of it in my past, there's definitely a lot of, marketing ops and marketing automation folks where we do tend to get a little bit siloed. We almost feel like inside of the marketing department, we're kind of on our own little island. And it's frankly easy for that to happen, and also easy to think that way. And I would encourage folks, especially for other marketing operations people, to try to adopt that mindset more. And I think we'll touch on this maybe later, but talking about the growth of marketing operations executives and what that career trajectory looks like. And I really think that if people who want to maybe one day get out of marketing ops and run a whole marketing department or become a director or vice president, so on and so forth, it's really important to start thinking that way and gain that understanding where, sure, maybe I'm an expert in marketing ops, but I really understand how my whole team performs, how it works together as a cohesive unit, and being able to report that way to higher ups. So I think that will help you kind of become a little bit more of a marketer and not just a marketing ops person.
Well, and it feels as if that's one of the ways that you are adding value to your team and to your organization. Because I liked your phrase of, I like to think of, think like a CEO. I like to think like a CMO, always trying to envision how is my job, the work that my team is doing is contributing to overall growth, overall revenue. Would you agree with that? And if so, are there other ways that you sort of focus on trying to improve or add value to the team or to the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, just to touch on the first part, I can't stress enough. I think embracing more of that global view of your marketing team and not just I'm marketing ops and that's kind of their own world. Make it part of your day to care, right? Care about the content in that email. Is that reflecting your team's, content strategy for the quarter or for the year? If not, don't be afraid to push back or provide a suggestion. Or, oh, hey, we're doing these event logistics and we sponsored this booth. And, oh, I saw this other cool company do this thing. Maybe that's something we could try at our trade shows. Sure, that's outside of your wheelhouse and marketing ops to be helping out with like event strategies and content strategies. But I think we see so much, right? We see emails going out and landing page copy, promoting webinars, promoting events, promoting ebooks. And when you do it long enough, you start to really just get it, right? And you start to be able to fully understand what's going on as far as a department. And so I think there's a lot that folks can learn along the way over the years they do it. And I think there's a lot of value we can add outside of just managing Marketo and some reporting or managing Pardot and some reporting, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love the constant, broadening of the view that both you have, but also how you're expressing and coaching your team on. I think that's super powerful. It also kind of makes me think a little bit about, as you're coaching your team, they have to have a sense of understanding the broad picture, understanding the technical aspects of what they're doing, et cetera. But I would imagine that there's also a sense of balance that you have to sort of convey here too. So, when you think about balance, generally marketing operations leaders and team members, I have found they often can struggle to find balance with their job responsibilities, other tasks, et cetera. So what strategies have you employed to, work through, challenges to balance, to help your team understand how should they, obtain balance?
Yeah. I would say one of the biggest things I started doing is really just prioritizing requests and your workload by the business case, right? And so again, kind of like we touched on earlier, embracing more of that revenue-centric mindset and then working backwards from it with the requests that come in. For example, you might get a request for someone that's like, oh, we really we need to start promoting this ebook. It went live a few days ago, and I'd love to do an email campaign around that. By the way, is there any way to go live tomorrow, knowing that it's going to require you to work late? And we've all been there in the world of marketing ops, right? Late nights, tight deadlines, you name it. But I think it's just being able to take that step back and say, actually, I'm working directly with the head of sales right now on a campaign that's going to directly impact revenue potentially tomorrow. So sorry, they can't go out tomorrow. Tell you what, why don't we meet early next week and we'll find a time that it can go out, try to meet some middle ground. But I think that's some big advice I can give people is like, we get so much thrown at us. And like I was saying earlier, we're kind of like the engine of a marketing team, if you will, the central support beam. And like you have to be able to effectively look at your projects, compartmentalize your days. And so I would say that's a big part of it. But I think another part too is you have to be really transparent and vocal with your boss and your team members about what those priorities are. Hey guys, here's how I approach my work. It's based upon, deadlines, obviously requests from higher ups, their level of importance, but also more importantly, how that contributes to lead gen and revenue. And if I'm getting competing priorities and one's clearly more significantly important than the other, that's going to get my attention first, right? And I think I'd say as well, maybe the last point is, this one's tough. You have to learn how to get good at saying no. We get asked to do so much. And again, working late nights, tight deadlines, it happens all the time. And you building off what I said earlier, you have to learn to say no, or just say, listen, sorry, can't happen today as you wanted it, but tell you what, I can get to it in the next 2-3 business days, whatever the case is. And that's not easy. But you have to set those boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's really really good advice, particularly the piece about saying no. And one of the things that I know that I learned from a corporate mentor many years ago was that it's always a question around is it do you say no? But their argument was it's not that it's no, but it's I can't do that for you, but what I can do, which is sort of what you were sort of just describing, meaning I can't do that because that does not align with our current priorities. But what I can do for you is X, Y, Z. I always thought that was really, sort of an interesting way, because it's not that you're telling the person like just straight out, no, you're a jerk for asking this, get out of my office. But it's like, I understand that's a priority for you as well. Let me understand that priority, but here's what I can do. Let's see how we can weave that in and get some of the higher priorities or the A priorities done, then move to some of the B priorities or other things that might not kind of bubble up to the top.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you. Yeah, worded it a little bit more elegantly than me, but that's exactly what I was trying to go for. Obviously, we don't just say no, right?
Yeah, right.
We come with a solution. But I think, right. And I think all those things that we talked about, prioritizing by business case, knowing when to push back on a deadline and say, sorry, I can't do that today, but I can help you this way, right? And then I think, like we were saying as well, as it's just, it all kind of comes together to help you gain more control and balance in your day. And I firmly believe in exchange, you're actually helping your whole team get better balance, right? Because once you're transparent and vocal about how you do this stuff and you start to, people understand your workflows, that will start to spread across the team. And I think you're indirectly helping the whole department become a little bit more organized. At least that's the hopeful end goal,
I would agree with that. I've also found, for me personally, that setting those right boundaries, getting the expectations, it actually then helps other groups in the organization learn how do they work with the marketing department. It's by setting those expectations. Now they know, oh gosh, well that didn't work very well. I didn't, that was a lot longer, or that wasn't, quite the reaction I was hoping for. I think maybe next time I'll provide a little bit more lead time, or maybe next time I'll come with a little bit more, focus on how this actually does align to overall corporate revenue goals or what have you. So I think it's also instructive, to your point, not only helps to balance the team, but I think it also helps to teach the rest of the organization how should you work with marketing so that we can be an effective partner for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say the very last thing I touch on that with that is you're also, by doing that, you're respecting yourself and you're setting your own boundaries, right? And that's also more the personal side of it. But it's like I said, in the world of marketing operations and automation, it's not uncommon to get tight deadlines and be working late, and maybe content production gets delayed, and then getting it approved by the director or the vice president gets delayed, but your time to execute stays the same, and it very easily can become that kind of crunch time. And so, for all the reasons we talked about, it's a great thing to do. But in turn, by doing that, you're also kind of setting your own boundaries and saying, a little bit of a self-respect thing. You're like, no, this is what's okay and this is what's not. And anyway, so yeah, I think all those things I'd recommend to others, if they're struggling with it, definitely try to approach it that way. And I think you'll definitely notice a difference.
Excellent advice. Thanks so much on that, Chris. Okay, so let's flip over to maybe some specifics here. Let's talk a little bit about lead gen. So, many marketing operations leaders, obviously, particularly in B2B organizations, struggle with lead gen. So, what have been sort of key or the most impactful lessons that you've learned along the way to maximize success with lead gen?
Yeah, I would say, this is something that you're seeing more and more, I think, be talked about in the industry for B2B marketing, but more revenue marketing, and stop just focusing on the MQL number, right? Focus more on like how many are actually turning into close won deals and revenue coming in. And so with that being said, I think the quality over the quantity, right? Any day of the week, if hypothetically my MQL goal was 250 MQLs a month, I don't care if I only generated 100, but I hit the revenue goal or went above and beyond it. And so I think that's something that A lot of people that maybe are struggling with some lead gen tactics really start thinking about it that way and work it backwards. Okay, here's all the leads that I closed won deals last month. What channels were they digesting the content on? What were their lead source values? What campaigns had influence in them getting there? And really trying to understand that, and just mapping that back to your promotional strategies and your efforts. Okay, great. So hypothetically, 25% of all my marketing source revenue last month came in from paid social. Okay, great. What are we doing there? How do we do more of that? What was the content that we promoted that people were digesting, so on and so forth. So I think that's maybe a little bit of a mindset shift that I don't think is earth shattering, but I know that's been more and more talked about in the world of B2B marketing over the last couple of years. Listening to some folks like, for example, like Chris Walker at Refine Labs, and I know sometimes like Dave Gerhardt talks about it, and there's a whole bunch of people now that are kind of embracing that mindset. But those are people that I follow that talk about all the time, and started to help shift my mindset about, oh, right, what if I generated all these MQLs, but none of them turned into closed won opportunities? Well, I'm feeling good because I hit my lead goal, but you're not actually helping support the business, right? And if those leads aren't converting in the funnel, then that's not really giving you a good indication of how your content strategy and promotions by channel are performing, right? So I think that's one of the things I would really focus on as far as how to approach lead gen and try to be a little bit more results driven. I think lastly too, one of the things I've seen is, just taking off my marketing and ops hat and just embracing it more like a marketer, is that content strategy. And what I mean by that is, you can't be overly salesy. I think modern day approach that's very effective in B2B is just objectively trying to educate your audience without the bait and switch of like, hey, time to meet with sales, right? Just make it your focus of, I just want to add value to you guys by educating you on what's going on, the types of solutions out there. Yes, we sell that too, but there's other people, and here's what works best and here's what doesn't. And it's kind of based upon where you're at. And just, when you approach a situation objectively like that, you're going to position your brand as a thought leader. You're going to position your brand as an expert, and the buyer is going to feel more comfortable coming back to you when they have questions about it, knowing that there isn't some sales rep ready to jump on them, right? And so I think that's another thing I would encourage a lot of companies to do as well, is if you're not doing that already, it is kind of becoming the best practice and one of the trends, and think about that through your content production, my top of funnel content to my bottom of funnel content, and then the channels, right? Like how I'm doing this over video versus an ebook versus a webinar versus a podcast. Just bring it all full circle, and understanding, of course, where your buyers are digesting that content. So I know I kind of threw a lot out there, but I hope that answers it.
It totally does, and I think your point about content is really fascinating because there's I think it was Gartner had some recent research, and I think it was pre-COVID. Gartner had research that showed that 70%, 70, of the B2B buyer journey happens through self-service without ever talking to a sales rep. They redid that research at the end of 2021, and the number had jumped from 70% to 78%. Now, part of that, of course, could be, it's COVID, more people working remotely, et cetera. But if you look at that research where 78% of B2B buyers, that journey happens self-service, researching on their own without ever talking to the sales rep, and then the sales rep actually takes them through the last 22%. That puts tremendous pressure on to your very point about content strategy and content marketing. So, I think the lessons that you talked about here, I think is really, really key. But can you build on that a little bit in terms of like, how do you make sure that the content that you're creating is actually what your buyer needs, when they need it, and that it's actually going to help them, propel themselves through the sales funnel. So any advice on that, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, and I imagine a lot of companies' product marketing teams are likely doing this, but interviewing buyers in the marketplace, whether they're a client, whether they're a prospect, you're able to get 15 minutes on their calendar, but just sitting down with them and speaking to them and almost, if you will, like a survey, right? And like gathering that type of real-time data, speaking with them. I think that's a great way to try to understand, like, how do you like to digest content, right? Where do you go when you're trying to educate yourself on a business problem and how it can be solved? I think that's one way. Now, obviously, a little bit easier said than done to go and meet off with 150 or whatever significant sample size of your buyers, right? But that's definitely one good way to do it. And I think another way too, about as far as how they're digesting content, where you can get the data, pull it, right? So are people digesting a lot of my content on social? Obviously we can look at impressions, we can look at clicks, you can use track links, get some of that data into your automation system, right? How are people getting to my website and downloading that content? Was it from a social post? Was it from paid search, right? Was it from organic search? Was it from my newsletter? And I think, lastly, it's a really good point you bring up, and don't mean to keep going back to it, but some of the stuff that I see a lot of people talking about is this new thing, dark social, right? And I think the cool thing about that is it's really, really talking about all these interactions that happen with B2B buyers and where they're learning, where they're getting ideas sparked, and it's not being tracked in traditional attribution softwares. So, for example, maybe I heard someone discuss a solution on the Art of Marketing Operations podcast, and that sparked me to go to that company's website. Attribution software is not going to be able to track that, right? They're probably going to label me as like an organic search lead based upon a Google referral URL, right? And so I think that's another huge thing that's happening today too. Is people are learning about stuff through community chat forums. For example, Marketo Nation, right? I can go through and read little blogs and like, oh wow, that's where that person solved it, and that's what sparked me to go to that website. Or learning from a podcast, or all these different areas, LinkedIn comments, right? Just going through those and seeing what people say. And it's not exactly foolproof, but one way you can try to track that is maybe putting on one of your lead capture forms, how did you hear about us, free text form, and just letting people tell you, oh, I heard about you on a podcast, right? And so I think that's another really good way, if you can collect that data, to understand this is where my buyer is hearing about me, and also that's where they digested that content, and that might completely change where you're putting your marketing dollars into promotional efforts.
Yeah, that's excellent. Now, you mentioned in your last response, you mentioned a little bit about automation systems and so forth. So,
Yeah.
is automation an important component for you in terms of your marketing operations efforts? And are you feeling that you're sort of striking the right balance between having enough automation, but not too much that it potentially complicates the buyer journey or messes with the buyer journey per se?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, as a starting point, it's like we part of our role is you have to be able to spot some inefficiencies, right? So really understanding, okay, great, maybe I have a general awareness nurture track that tries to warm up leads and progress them through the funnel, but just really being able to take that step back and just say, where are things inefficient? Where is there a constantly manual intervention? Does that make sense? Does it not? And obviously this can be very dependent upon who your buyer is and the buyer personas. Maybe your organization has multiple buyer personas where you can't do these kind of one size fits all automation processes. And maybe you have to make it more highly customized. So where I'm going with that is I think ultimately, once you start to really learn your business and the buyer of your product, you're going to be able to start to identify, oh, here's some nurture tracks that are applicable to everyone. And I can start to create some automated processes between lead scoring and how they're getting routed to sales, alerts going off, how they go from email 1 in the cadence to maybe email 3 if they're going to be skipping around, as opposed to if it's very, very custom, you have a lot of different buyer profiles and you have to create more customized options. At some point, there might be automation that's actually hindering you because you're trying to use automated processes almost as a catch-all to fit everyone and get them to progress through, but that might not work for a certain buyer persona. And there might have to be some human manual intervention to deliver the most value and get that best customer experience. So I would say that, obviously as someone very big proponent of marketing automation, I try to avoid that where I can. I try to establish processes and allowing it to work for everyone. But again, I think it's highly dependent upon, your business and your customers. But I think, again, trying to approach it a little bit more like a marketer, we need to be thinking, how do we deliver the most value? What is the best customer experience? Within reason of, okay, maybe I should sacrifice a little automation to help deliver that more value,
Yeah, well, and I liked your comment there too about making sure that you understand the buyer persona. And there's, if you understand that, to your point, certain buyer personas, this is going to really resonate with. Others just need more of a, a direct touch. So I think that's good. Now, so Chris, another thing that I think is interesting, particularly about your current role, and that is the roles of both partnerships and event marketing. So let's talk about partnerships first. So obviously I know partnerships is an important component of your current marketing mix and potentially maybe in your previous career experiences. So can you share any advice on how to incorporate partnership marketing into aspects of a company's overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the ways that I like to identify this is, I'd start and say there's always some obvious partnerships out there, right? Maybe there's some really strategic media partners that it's like, oh, I know the audience they have, it's full of my buyers. I gotta get them to sponsor one of my webinars, or I gotta get them to come sponsor or speak on my podcast, whatever the case is. Some of that's obvious and it's like a no-brainer. But I think in general, the way that I like to approach it is working backwards from your goals and understanding here's what I can achieve with my internal resources, and here's what I can't, right? And so knowing, okay, hypothetically, my revenue goal this month is $1 million source for marketing based upon my database size, average conversion rates from emails, how those converted leads turn into MQLs, progress through my funnel, and turn into close won opportunities. I can only achieve 50% of that with my internal resources, maybe if I'm lucky a little higher. Well, that leaves a delta, right? Well, how am I going to go find another $500,000? And that's a great way to start spotting. I bet if I worked with a partner and maybe they hosted and sponsored a webinar, they might be able to help attract other industry leaders as speakers, increase my reach, right? Get more people to register, and try to get more leads in my funnel. And I think that's one way I would encourage folks to really think about it, is just understanding here's what I can achieve with my internal resources, here's what I can't. Okay, great. Let's look at the areas that maybe I'm a little bit weaker in and that I could use a partner to help, whether it's with events and trade shows, whether it's with webinars, podcasts, whatever the case is. But I think that's a good way to start to think about, okay, I need a partner. Now I need to hone in on which one is the right one, but you're slowly refining into the right area and right channels of where you're looking for those partners. And then, of course, lastly, hopefully you have the marketing budget to help support it, pay for it.
Right. Well, and I think this is an interesting tie to what you mentioned earlier about thinking like a CEO, thinking like a CMO, and always sort of having the revenue context, in mind. Your comment earlier about prioritizing requests based on through the lens of revenue and revenue goals. And so your comment here about partnerships is a really, really good one, because it's one thing to launch off a partnership. It's another thing to manage an event. But by starting with the revenue goal and seeing where the delta is based on existing resources, existing investment, will you get there? And if you can't get there, then, this is an interesting way of looking at partnerships and events, because it's not that you're just, forming a partnership or planning, a special marketing event just to do it. You're literally doing it through the lens of, again, the revenue context. And if you don't think that you can make those goals, here's a lever that you can pull that gets you there. So I love how you look at that from, again, through that revenue lens. It's sort of this consistent theme, throughout our chat today. And I just love how you're using those as the levers that you need to achieve the revenue goal.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And right. And I think we might touch on this in a little bit, but I think you're going to see more and more, likely over the next 10 plus years, a lot more CMOs coming from a marketing ops background. And I think, for a lot of other marketing ops folks out there that are wondering, what does my career trajectory look like? Do I want to do marketing ops forever? Do I ever want to try something else? I think, once again, just encouraging folks to really start thinking more like that. And you're going to get more trust from senior leaders. Oh, they're not just siloed in the world of marketing ops, data, technology, and reporting. They're able to take more of that global view and understand that, of course, cash flow is the lifeblood of a business. And so, you have to be able to start thinking that way to better do your job, better serve your company, but also be more applicable for those promotions when they show up, right?
Yeah, and just be ready for that. Exactly. So Chris, before we wrap up today's episode, what is the main takeaway that you want to leave our audience with in understanding the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
Yeah, I would say I think a big part of it is kind of like we were going on earlier about that career trajectory. I firmly do believe that's a challenge that I've seen for myself, and I think for other marketing ops people, is you start to wonder, it gets a little easy to be capped out, right? Like, to be very candid, you don't see too many director of marketing ops or vice president of marketing ops. Of course, they're out there, maybe more so at larger companies that have larger marketing teams. But I think there's a lot of us out there that do start to wonder, okay, I've been doing this for getting close to a decade. I'm at the manager, senior manager mark, the salaries that come along with that. Where do I go from here? Do I just kind of stay stagnant here for the rest of my career? How do I get to that next level? And I think, again, embracing more of a revenue-centric mindset, trying to think a little bit more like a CEO, CMO, put yourself into the other departments of marketing, events, branding, content generation, try to learn the ropes, get to help them. And then networking too. You need to be good friends, of course, with your senior leadership team. You need to be in close contact with your fellow marketing colleagues, become best friends with sales, become friends with your product team. These are all things that I think, again, one can start to do that over time, you will start to get it a little bit more and how marketers function and not just marketing ops. And I think, again, all of that will make you more valuable and make you seem more applicable to becoming, say, a director of marketing or a VP of marketing, or one day becoming a CMO. And so, yeah, I just think that's kind of the one that comes top of mind to me for marketing operations executives and challenges we face is, where do I go from here? How do I not stay stagnant? How do I keep growing?
That is excellent advice, Chris. I appreciate that so much. Well, this wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thanks so much for joining us today, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, until next time, everyone, stay safe, take care, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.